Space was silent, but inside the horizon's edge, chaos reigned. Jump drive is offline! Something's interfering with it! Lieutenant Rains called out, his fingers flying over the console. Captain Elias Hart tightened his grip on the command chair. The Horizon's Edge was a scout-class vessel, not built for direct confrontation, but that didn't seem to matter now. Surrounding them in a slow, methodical approach were sleek, predatory ships, massive constructs of polished metal and pulsating energy. The insignia of the Galactic Empire gleamed under distant starlight. Unknown fleet has locked onto us with targeting sensors. Ensign Valdez reported, voice tight. Confirm their ID. Hart ordered, though he already knew. Valdez swallowed. They match records of the Galactic Empire. The bridge fell into a tense hush. The Galactic Empire, an expansive, ancient power that ruled with an iron fist, had been nothing more than a rumor in human space. Humanity's fledgling confederation had never made direct contact, only heard the horror stories of planetary conquests and technological supremacy. Now they were face to face. A chime sounded. We're being hailed, Valdez said. Hart leaned back, exhaling slowly. Put it through. A holographic figure materialized before them, a tall, severe-looking alien draped in regalia that shimmered with authority. His elongated, silver-skinned face bore an expression of absolute disdain. His eyes, black like the void, gleamed with predatory amusement. I am High Admiral Zyros of the Galactic Empire, the figure intoned, his voice rich with arrogance. You have trespassed into Imperial space. Hart smiled faintly. That's funny, Admiral. Our charts don't show this as yours. Zyros' expression didn't change. Because your species lacks knowledge of the true order of the stars. Your kind does not belong in this region. His head tilted slightly. Your ship is primitive. Hart glanced at his crew. Rains clenched his jaw, Valdez gripped the console, and the others kept their gazes locked on their instruments. The tension was thick, but Hart wasn't about to let some overstuffed Imperial dictate the mood. He chuckled. Yeah, well, we make do. Something tells me you're not here to give us a warm welcome. Zyros' lips curled in a condescending smile. You are correct. Surrender your vessel and prepare for boarding. You are now subjects of the Empire. Hart let the silence stretch. Then he exhaled sharply, rubbing his chin. That's a hell of an offer. I'm gonna have to pass, though. Zyros blinked, as if surprised by the audacity. You misunderstand, Captain? This is not a request. Hart leaned forward. No, I think you're the one misunderstanding, Admiral. You've got a lot of firepower out there, sure. But you don't know us. And that's a mistake. The bridge crew held their breath. Zyros studied Hart for a moment before nodding to someone off-screen. Very well. Let us see what your defiance earns you. The transmission cut. Immediately, Valdez paled. Sir, they're charging weapons. Shields up. Evasive maneuvers. Hart barked. The Horizon's Edge lurched as thrusters fired, twisting the ship into an erratic pattern. Energy beams streaked through the black, narrowly missing them. A near hit sent a violent shudder through the hull. They're hurting us, Rains said grimly. Hart's mind raced. Direct combat wasn't an option. Their best bet was evasion and misdirection. He tapped the console, bringing up the sector's schematics. A dense asteroid belt loomed nearby. Perfect. Valdez, feed new coordinates to helm. Full burn toward that asteroid belt. They'll follow us, Rains protested. Hart smirked. That's the point. The ship surged forward. The Imperial fleet responded immediately, closing in. More shots rang out, one clipped their port side, sending a ripple of sparks across the bridge. Hull integrity at 84%, Rains reported. They weren't going to survive a prolonged chase. Hart had one shot at this. Rains, reroute auxiliary power to rear deflectors. Make it look like we're trying to shield our engines. Rains hesitated but nodded. They'll think we're desperate. Exactly. Hart grinned. Now, when we hit that asteroid field, I want thrusters at full lateral drift. Valdez's eyes widened. Sir, that's risky? Yeah. Do it. The asteroid belt loomed ahead. The horizon's edge hurtled toward the swirling mass of tumbling rock and debris. The Imperial ships, arrogant in their superiority, followed. Now! Hart ordered. Thrusters fired. The ship spun sideways, slipping between two massive asteroids. The Imperials, expecting a direct escape, adjusted too late. The leading warship clipped a chunk of rock, sending a chain reaction through the field. Explosions erupted as debris slammed into pursuers. The horizon's edge weaved through the chaos, narrowly dodging destruction. The Imperials struggled to maneuver in the unpredictable field. One ship, larger and bulkier, collided head-on with an asteroid, erupting into flame. Hart grinned. And that's why you don't underestimate humans. The ship burst free of the belt's far side. The Imperial fleet, momentarily disorganized, lagged behind. They're regrouping, Valdez said. Hart nodded. Good. Because we're just getting started. The chase was far from over, but now, the game was on his terms. The horizon's edge hurtled through the darkness, engines burning hot as it cleared the asteroid field. The ship was still intact, but that was the only good news. Damage reports flooded in, and power fluctuations flickered through the lights. The Imperial fleet had been momentarily scattered, but they weren't gone. We've bought ourselves a minute, maybe two, Lieutenant Rains muttered, scanning the readings. They're already reorganizing. Captain Elias Hart exhaled, rubbing his temple. The gamble had worked, but the chase wasn't over. If they didn't act fast, they'd be vaporized. Status on the ship? He asked. Shields are at 36%, Rains reported. Minor hull breaches on decks 3 and 5. Jump drive still offline. Whatever interference they hit us with is sticking. Hart turned to Ensign Valdez. What about comms? Valdez shook her head. Long range is jammed. I can boost short range, but unless there's a friendly ship in spitting distance, we're on our own. Hart frowned. The Imperials were playing this smart, cutting off their escape, blocking communications, making sure humanity's little rogue scout didn't slip away unnoticed. Too bad for them. He leaned over the console, scanning the sector's star map. The asteroid belt had been their first trick, but they needed something bigger. Something the Imperials wouldn't expect. There, he pointed. That gas giant. Rains followed his gaze. LV-937? It's a storm world. Violent atmosphere, high radiation. No known settlements. Exactly, Hart said. They won't expect us to go in. Valdez's eyebrows rose. Because we'd be insane to try. Hart grinned. Good thing insanity is part of the job description. A sudden alert flashed red across the consoles. They're back on us, Valdez called. Lead Imperial ships closing fast. Weapon locks detected. Hart slammed a fist against the panel. All power to engines. Get us to that gas giant before they turn us into space dust. The ship surged forward, the engines straining under the demand. Behind them, the Imperials were gaining. Energy blasts streaked past, close enough to shake the hull. The bridge lights flickered as another hit rocked the ship. Shields at 22%, Rains shouted. The gas giant loomed ahead, an enormous sphere of churning clouds and electric storms. Its atmosphere was a roiling mass of crimson and gold, lightning dancing across its surface. Crossing entry threshold in 10 seconds, Valdez announced. Hart braced himself. All hands strap in. It's going to get rough. The horizon's edge plunged into the gas giant's stormy upper layers. The transition was immediate and brutal. Turbulence threw them sideways. The ship groaned under the strain, warning klaxons blaring. Lightning crackled outside, illuminating the bridge in eerie flashes. External sensors are struggling, Valdez said, voice tight. But the Imperials. She paused, squinting at the readings. They're hesitating. Hart smirked. Guess they don't like flying blind. Through the haze of static-filled visuals, they could still see the Imperial fleet hovering just outside the storm's edge. Their pursuers were wary, unwilling to risk their sleek, finely tuned warships in this unpredictable mess. "They're scanning," Rains muttered. "Trying to track us without coming in." Hart saw his opportunity. "Then let's disappear." Rains blinked. "What do you mean?" Hart activated the ship's internal map, overlaying their location with the storm's projected movements. "This planet's atmosphere is a chaotic nightmare, right? High winds, fluctuating energy fields, debris storms, perfect cover. We power down, go dark, and let the planet swallow us." Valdez hesitated. "If we kill the engines, we'll lose control." Hart nodded. "That's the point. They can't track what they can't predict." The crew exchanged glances, then Rains nodded. "It's risky, but it might just work." "Damn right it will," Hart said. "Reroute power to life support, shut down everything else." One by one, the ship's systems powered down. Lights dimmed, the hum of the engines faded, and the ship drifted. The storm took hold, tossing them in unpredictable directions. Outside, flashes of lightning obscured them further, masking their presence in the electromagnetic chaos. "Now we wait," Hart said, eyes locked on the sensors. Minutes passed. The bridge remained silent, save for the occasional groan of metal under pressure. Through the thick haze, the Imperial ships remained at a cautious distance. They weren't advancing. "Come on," Hart whispered. "Give up." The moments stretched. Then, "They're retreating," Valdez said, barely containing her relief. "The lead ships are pulling back." Rains exhaled. "They're cutting their losses. Figuring we're already dead." Hart grinned. "Smart move." The Imperials lingered a moment longer, then slowly drifted away, fading from the scanner. Valdez let out a shaky laugh. "We did it." Hart leaned back in his chair, exhaling. "Not yet. We still need to get out of here." They had bought themselves time, but they weren't safe yet. The storm was still a death trap, and the Imperials might return. But for now, they had the advantage. And Hart planned to keep it. The horizon's edge drifted through the storm, concealed within the planet's chaotic atmosphere. With the engines powered down, only emergency lights cast a dim glow across the bridge. The silence was thick with tension. Captain Elias Hart studied the flickering readouts. The ship's outer hull groaned as turbulent winds shoved them in unpredictable directions. Static-filled displays struggled to provide clear data. "Status?" he asked. Lieutenant Rains ran a quick systems check. "Hull integrity's holding. Shields are recharging slowly, but they won't last if we take another hit. Jump drive is still down." He frowned. "And the storm's dragging us deeper." Hart leaned forward. "How long before we get crushed?" Valdez checked the trajectory. "At this rate? Maybe 30 minutes before the pressure becomes a problem." Hart exhaled. 30 minutes before the planet itself turned them into scrap. That was the bad news. The good news was that the Imperials thought they were dead. "All right," he said. "Time to turn this mess into an advantage." Rains gave him a skeptical look. "We're spiraling into a gas giant. How is this an advantage?" Hart tapped the console. "Because the Imperials aren't expecting us to come back." Valdez blinked. "You're saying we use this storm to strike back?" Hart grinned. "Exactly. They think we're gone. That means they'll drop their guard. We come in fast, hit them hard, and vanish before they figure out what's happening." Rains crossed his arms. "And how do we pull that off without getting vaporized?" Hart brought up the planetary model. "This storm isn't just cover, it's a slingshot. We use the wind currents to build momentum, power up at the last second, and launch ourselves right into their blind spot." Valdez's eyes widened. "You want to ride the storm?" "More like let it throw us," Hart said. "If we time it right, we'll burst out at full speed with no energy signature until the last second." Rains let out a low whistle. "That's a hell of a play." Hart smirked. "The best ones always are." He turned to Valdez. "Get me storm pattern projections." Find the strongest current that'll throw us right into their fleet. Valdez's fingers moved fast over the console. The storm's swirling mass lit up on the screen, chaotic but not entirely random. There, she said, pointing to a massive, spiraling updraft. That'll launch us like a bullet. Hart nodded. Perfect. He turned to Rains. We'll need full power to engines the second we breach the storm. Can you give me that? Rains exhaled. I can reroute emergency reserves, but we'll be running on fumes afterward. Hart clapped him on the shoulder. Then we make it count. Valdez's voice was tight with anticipation. Course locked in. Hart settled into his chair. All right, people. Strap in. This ride's going to be rough. The ship trembled as it aligned with the storm's powerful updraft. The hull groaned, pressure building. Hart kept his eyes on the readouts. On my mark. 3, 2, 1, now! Rains hit the ignition. The engines roared to life. The ship surged forward, caught in the storm's pull, flung like a missile. Lightning flashed past the windows. The storm howled around them. The ship shook violently as it tore through the swirling clouds, gaining velocity with every second. The bridge lights flickered as they pushed the engines to their limit. Breach in 5 seconds! Valdez shouted. Hart gripped the armrests. Hold on! The ship burst through the storm's edge like a projectile fired from a railgun. The sudden stillness was almost deafening. Then, contact! Imperial ship's dead ahead! Valdez reported. Hart grinned. Light him up! The horizon's edge erupted from the storm like an avenging ghost. The Imperials never saw it coming. The closest enemy cruiser barely had time to react before Hart fired. The ship's forward cannon spat glowing lances of energy, striking the cruiser's exposed underbelly. Explosions rippled across its hull. They're scrambling! Rains called out. The Imperials fumbled to respond, caught completely off guard. Their tight formation shattered as ships scrambled to evade the unexpected attack. Hit and run! Hart ordered. We don't stick around! The ship twisted through the fleet, weaving between the larger warships. The Imperials fired wildly, their shots barely grazing the horizon's edge. Valdez's voice was electric with excitement. They're confused as hell! Hart smirked. Let's make it worse. He steered the ship directly toward the largest battleship. The Imperial gunners hesitated, uncertain if they were about to be rammed. At the last second, Hart veered upward, forcing 2 Imperial ships to collide in the confusion. Rains let out a whoop. Now that's a trick shot! Alarms blared as enemy fire finally clipped their tail. Sparks erupted across the bridge. Shields critical! Valdez warned. Hart gritted his teeth. One more push. We go for their command ship. He swerved toward the fleet's central vessel. It loomed ahead, its bridge glowing with energy. If they could take it out. A sudden jolt sent the horizon's edge spiraling. The main thruster sputtered, then died. Engine failure! Rains yelled. Hart slammed his fist against the console. Damn it! We're sitting ducks! The Imperial flagship turned its guns on them, ready to finish the job. The crew braced for impact. Then, unexpectedly, an explosion ripped through the flagship's side. A second blast followed, tearing through its hull. What the hell? Valdez gasped. Through the chaos, another vessel emerged, human, sleek, heavily armed. The familiar markings of the Confederation's fleet gleamed under the starlight. A voice crackled through the comms. This is Captain Reyes of the Dauntless. Need a hand, Horizon's Edge? Hart let out a breath, grinning. Took you long enough. The Dauntless unleashed another barrage, forcing the Imperials into full retreat. The once unstoppable fleet scattered, their confidence shattered. Rains exhaled. We actually pulled it off. Hart leaned back, victorious. Damn right we did. They weren't just survivors. They were the ones who made the mighty Empire blink first. The Horizon's Edge drifted through the battlefield, its hull battered but intact. Sparks flickered from damaged panels, and the faint hum of emergency systems filled the bridge. Outside, the remnants of the Imperial fleet scattered like startled prey, their once dominant presence reduced to a desperate retreat. Captain Elias Hart exhaled, watching the distant flashes of gunfire as the Dauntless tore through the last Imperial stragglers. The battle was ending, but the consequences were just beginning. "Damage report," he called out. Lieutenant Rains checked the readings. "Main thrusters fried, secondary systems are barely holding. Shields are shot. We're flying on luck and duct tape." Hart smirked. "Then it's just another day in the office." A chime signaled an incoming transmission. Ensign Valdez patched it through, and a holographic figure flickered to life. Captain Reyes of the Dauntless, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "Hell of a mess you've made, Hart," Reyes said. Hart leaned back in his chair. "Yeah, well, you know me. Always making friends in high places." Reyes snorted. "The Imperials don't look too friendly." Hart's grin widened. "That's because they just got their teeth kicked in." Reyes' expression hardened. "They won't forget this." Hart knew she was right. The Galactic Empire wasn't the type to let a humiliation slide. Today, they had been outmaneuvered, outplayed, but they would regroup, reassess, and come back stronger. "Which is why we need to make sure they remember it," Hart said. Reyes raised an eyebrow. "You're not suggesting we stick around?" Hart glanced at the tactical map. The Imperial fleet had fractured, but some warships remained at the system's edge, watching, regrouping. They weren't attacking, but they weren't leaving either. "They're waiting," Valdez murmured. "Testing how we respond." Hart nodded. "They want to see if we back down." Reyes sighed. "We should cut our losses while we can." Hart studied the display, considering. Running would be the safer move, but safety had never won wars. If humanity wanted to stake its claim in the galaxy, it had to show strength. He made his decision. "Valdez, open a broad-frequency channel. I want them to hear this." Valdez hesitated, then nodded. "Channel open." Hart leaned forward, voice steady. "To the forces of the Galactic Empire, you came here expecting an easy victory. You thought humanity would kneel." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "You were wrong." On the screen, Imperial ships remained motionless, but Hart knew they were listening. "This isn't your galaxy to rule," he continued. "You may have the bigger fleet, the shinier tech, but that doesn't mean a damn thing against people who refuse to be conquered." A static-filled response crackled through. A familiar voice. "You speak as if you've won," said High Admiral Zyros, his usual arrogance laced with restrained fury. Hart chuckled. "I don't speak as if I've won, Admiral. I have won. And you know it." A long pause. Then, "This is not over, human," Zyros said, his tone ice-cold. Hart smirked. "Good. I'd be disappointed if it was." The transmission cut. A moment later, the remaining Imperial ships turned away, engines flaring as they retreated beyond sensor range. They weren't gone for good, but they had backed down, for now. On the bridge, a breath of relief swept through the crew. Rains let out a low whistle. "Well, that's something you don't see every day." Valdez shook her head in disbelief. "We just stared down an Imperial fleet, and they blinked." Hart leaned back, stretching. "Not bad for a primitive species, huh?" Rey's voice came through the calms again. "You're insane, Hart." He grinned. "You say that like it's a bad thing." Reyes sighed. "We're sending a recovery team. You're in no condition to fly." Hart exhaled. "Yeah, figured as much." He glanced at Rains. "Start prepping for a tow." Rains smirked. "Was hoping you'd say that. We could use a break." The tension eased slightly as the Dauntless approached. The battle was over, but something deeper had changed. Humanity had faced one of the galaxy's greatest powers, and won. It wouldn't be the last encounter. The Empire would return, stronger, angrier. But next time, they wouldn't just see humans as a nuisance. They'd see them as a threat. And Hart was perfectly fine with that. He leaned back in his chair, grinning. "Let him come."